Section 5 of The Mahatma and the Hare, A Dream Story. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Mahatma and the Hare, A Dream Story by H. Rider Haggard. The Coursing. Quite a moon went by before I recovered from Tom's shot. At first, I thought that I was going to die, for although luckily none of my bones were broken, the pain in my back was dreadful. When I tried to ease the agony by rubbing against roots, it only became worse, for the fur fell off, leaving sores upon which flies settled. I could scarcely eat or sleep, and grew so thin that the bones nearly poked through my pelt. Indeed, I wanted very much to die, but could not. On the contrary, by degrees I recovered, till at last I was quite strong again, and like other hares, except for the 6 little gray tufts upon my back, and 1 hole through my right ear. Now all this while I had lived in the swamp near the sea, but when my strength returned, I thought of my old home, to which something seemed to draw me. Also, there were no turnips near the swamp, and as the winter came on, I found very little to eat there. So one day, or rather one night, I traveled back home. As it happened, the first hare that I met near the big wood was my sister. She was very glad to see me, although she had forgotten how we came to part, and when I spoke of our father and mother, these did not seem to interest her. Still, from that time forward, we lived together more or less till her end came. One day, this was after we had made our home in the big wood, as hares often do in winter, there was a great disturbance. When we tried to go out to feed at daylight, we found little fires burning everywhere, and near to them boys who beat themselves and shouted. So we went back into the wood, where the pheasants were running to and fro in a great state of mind. Some hours later, when the sun was quite high, men began to march about, and scores of shots were fired a long way off. Also a wounded cock pheasant fell near to us and fluttered away, making a queer noise in its throat. It looked very funny, stumbling along on one leg, with its beak gaping, and 2 of the long feathers in its tail broken. "I know what that is," I said to my sister. "Let's be gone before they shoot us. I've had enough of being shot." So off we went, rushing past a boy by his fire, who yelled and threw a stick at us. But as it happened, on the borders of the property of the red-faced man, there were poachers who knew that hares would come out of the wood on this day of shooting, and had made ready for us by setting wire nooses in the gaps of the hedges through which we ran. I got my foot into one of these, but managed to shake it off. My sister was not so lucky, for her head went into another of them. She kicked and tore, but the more she struggled, the tighter drew the noose. I watched her for a little while, until one of the poachers ran up with a stick. Then I went away, as I could not bear to see her beaten to death, and that was the end of my sister. So now I was the only one left alive of our family, except perhaps some younger brothers whom I did not know, though I think it was one of these that afterwards I saw shot quite dead by Giles. He went over and lay as still as though he had never moved in all his life. Death seems a very wonderful thing, Mahatma, but I won't ask you what it is, because I perceive that you can't answer. After this, nothing happened to me for a long while. Indeed, I had the best time of my life, and grew very strong and big. Yes, the strongest and biggest hare of any that I ever saw, also the swiftest of foot. Twice I was chased by dogs, once by Giles' black beast Nigger, and once by that of a shepherd. Finding that I could run right away from them without exerting myself at all, I grew to despise dogs. Ah, little did I know then that there are many different breeds of these animals. One day in midwinter, as the weather was very mild and open, I was lying on the rough grass field that I have spoken of, which borders a flat stretch of moorland. On this moorland in summer grew tall ferns, but now these had died and been broken down by the wind. Suddenly I woke up from my sleep to see a number of men walking and riding towards me. They were tenants, and others who, although the real coursing season had not yet begun in our neighborhood, had been asked by Grampus to come to try their greyhounds upon his land. Those of them who walked for the most part held 2 long, lean dogs on a string, while 1 or 2 carried dead hares. They were dreadful-looking hares that seemed to have been bitten all over. At least their coats were wet and broken. I shivered at the sight of them, feeling sure that I was going to be put to some new kind of torture. Besides the men on foot were those on horseback, among whom I recognized the red-faced man and my enemy, the dreadful Tom. Most of the others were people called farmers, who seemed very happy and excited, and from time to time drank something out of little bottles which they passed to each other. Giles was not there. Now I know that this was because he hated coursing, which killed down hares. Hares, he thought, ought to be shot, not coursed. Whilst I watched, wondering what to do, there was a shout of, "There she goes!" and all the long dogs began to pull at their strings. Off the necks of 2 of them the collars seemed to fall, and away they leapt, pursuing a hare. The men on the horses galloped after them, but the men on foot remained where they were. Now I was afraid to get up and run, lest they should loose the other dogs on me. So I lay still, till presently I saw the hare coming back towards me, followed by the 2 dogs whose noses almost touched its tail. It was exhausted, and tried to twist and spring away to the right, but as it did so, one of the dogs caught it in its mouth and bit it till it died. "That was a rotten hare," said Tom, who cantered up just then. "It gave no course at all." "Yes," puffed Grampus. "Hope the next one will show better sport." "Hope so, too," answered Tom, "especially as it is Jack and Jill's turn to be slipped, and they are the best greyhounds for 20 miles round." Then the red-faced man gave some orders, and Jack and Jill were brought forward by the man whose business it was to slip the dogs. One of them was black, and one yellow. I think Jack was the black one, a dreadful, sneaking-looking beast, with a white tip to its tail, which ended in a sort of curl. "Forward now," said Grampus, "and go slow. There's sure to be another puss or 2 in this rough grass." Next second I was up and away, and before you could count 12, Jack and Jill were after me. I saw them standing on their hind legs, straining at the cord. Then the collars fell from them, and they leapt forward like the light. My thought was to get back to the wood, which was about a minute's run behind me, but I did not dare to turn and head for it because of the long line of people through which I must pass if I tried to do so. So I ran straight for the moorland, hoping to turn there and reach the wood on its other side, although this meant a long journey. For a while all went well with me, and having a good start, I began to hope that I should outrun these beasts, as I had the shepherd's dog and the retriever. But I did not know Jack and Jill. Just as I reached the borders of the moor, I heard the patter of their feet behind me, and looking back saw them coming up, about as far away as I was from Tom when he shot me. They were running quite close together, and behind them galloped the judge and other men. There was a fence here, and I bolted through a hole in it. The greyhounds jumped over it, and for a moment lost sight of me, for I had turned and run down the near side of the fence. But Tom, who had come through a gap, saw me and waved his arm, shouting, and next instant Jack and Jill saw me too. Then, as the going was rough by the fence, I took to the open moor, always trying, however, to work round to the left in the hope that I might win the shelter of the wood. On we went like the wind, and now Jack and Jill were quite close behind me, though before they got there I had managed to circle, so that at last my head pointed to the wood, which was more than half a mile away. Their speed was greater than mine, and I knew I must soon be caught. At last they were not more than 2 yards behind, and for the first time I twisted so that they overshot me, which gave me another start. 3 times they came up, and 3 times I wrenched or twisted. The wood was not so far away now, but I was almost spent. What was I to do? What was I to do? I saw a clump of firs to the left, a big clump and thick, and remembered that there was a hare's run through it. I reached it just as Jill was on top of me, and once more they lost sight of me for a while as they ran round the clump, staring and jumping. When they saw me again on the further side, I was 30 yards ahead of them, and the wood was perhaps 250 yards away. But now I could only run more slowly, for my heart seemed to be bursting, though luckily Jack and Jill were getting tired also. Still, they soon came up, and now I must twist every few yards, or be caught in their jaws. I can't tell you what I felt, Mahatma, and until you have been hunted by greyhounds, you will never know. It was horrible, yet I managed to twist and jump so that always Jack and Jill just missed me. The farmers on the horses laughed to see my desperate leaps and wrenches. But Tom did worse than laugh. Noting that I was getting quite near the wood, he rode between me and it, trying to turn me into the open, for he wished to see me killed. "Don't do that! It isn't sportsmanlike!" shouted the red-faced man. "Give the poor beast a chance." I don't know whether he obeyed or not, as just then I made my last double and felt Jill's teeth cut through the fur of my scut and heard them snap. I had dodged Jill, but Jack was right on to me, and the wood was still 20 yards away. I could not twist any more. It was just which of us would get there first. I gathered all my remaining strength, for I was mad with terror, and bounded forward. After me came Jack. I felt his hot breath on my flank. I jumped the ditch. Yes, I found power to jump that ditch where there was a rabbit run just by the trunk of a young oak. Jack jumped after me. We must both have been in the air at the same time. But I got through the rabbit run, whereas Jack hit his sharp nose against the trunk of the tree and broke his neck. Yes, he fell dead into the ditch. I crawled on a few yards to a thick clump and squatted down, for I could not stir another inch. So it came about that I heard them all talking on the other side. One of them said I was the finest hare he had ever coursed. Others, who had dragged Jack out of the ditch, lamented his death, especially the owner, who vowed that he was worth 50 pounds, and abused Tom. Tom, he said, had caused him to be killed. I don't know how, but I suppose because he had ridden forward and tried to turn me. The red-faced man also scolded Tom. Then he added, "Well, I'm glad she got off, for she'll give us a good run with the harriers one day. I shall always know that hare again by the white marks on its back. Also, it is the biggest I have seen for a long while. Come on, my friends. The dog is dead, and there's an end of it. At least we have had a good morning's sport, so let's go to the hall and get some lunch." The hare paused for a little, then looked up at me in its comical fashion and asked, "Did you ever course hares, Mahatma?" "Not I, thank goodness," I answered. "Well, what do you think of coursing?" "I would rather not say," I replied. "Then I will," said the hare with conviction. "I think it horrible." "Yes, but, hare, you do not remember the pleasure the sport gives to the men and the dogs. You look at it from an entirely selfish point of view. And so would you, Mahatma, if you had felt Jack's hot breath on your back and Jill's teeth in your tail." End of section 5, read by John R. Moore, Albertville, Alabama, December 2022.